Mm-hmm. That's good. Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll just start with your early inspirations and how you discovered art.
Well, I suppose I was always interested in art from I was a child. Um, I was interested in sketching, drawing, painting. I suppose my first painting that I still have, was from I suppose I was 12 or around that age. So yeah, I was just always interested in art.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And you tell us about your life has taken a few twists and turns in terms of your artistic career. Maybe you could sort of just start to tell us how it started to evolve when you were a young man and what went wrong.
Well, I had decided from, I guess, probably about the O levels that I kind of wanted to proceed down the artistic route of life. So I decided wherever I want to, I'll go in and did A level art and go through the traditional route of this progressing to art college, and I got accepted to go to Liverpool, and that was 1983. But due to family circumstances, my father got attacked by a bull at probably in late 70s, early 80s. The exact time escapes me. But because of that, he took the early onset of arthritis. So the disease was quite progressive at that stage, and he was in line, so we left him basically. He wasn't able to walk or work, so the farm was a partnership between my father and my uncle, and it was left the workload for my uncle, which was quite intense. So I had to again take a certain amount of that workload off my uncle. So it was then around that time when I was finishing my A levels, my parents asked me if they wouldn't mind, staying at home to become a farmer. So I guess at that stage I couldn't see a possible easy way into an art industry to become successful. Mm-hmm. So I kind of almost it felt easy to make the decision to become a farmer.
Mm-hmm. So was that, I imagine that was that quite a blow?
It was.
How did you feel about that?
No, I wouldn't have said it was at that stage. I always had the thing in mind. I always intended to keep art on as a hobby. Where I could paint and draw and sketch, and I still enjoyed it for a considerable number of years as I painted. And I always would have given. I gave all my wedding. Ironically, I gave all my paintings away as wedding presents. So they're all over the place. But it wasn't so much a total break from art. It was because I had that transition period where I was almost gave relinquished my artistic career for my agricultural career.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't there wasn't a cut-off point where I just gave up art.
Yeah, it just sort of
materialised.
Took a back seat. Well, because you had a family then, and of course that can be quite demanding.
Yes.
So what then? So what then made you sort of pick it up after all those years of it being on the back burner?
I suppose a little bit irony in this one was I took it not well myself. I had quite a problematic gallbladder, like quite a lot of people in their middle age. I spent, I think it was basically a month in the hospital at 3 separate times, recovering from this gallbladder, and I just basically got bored and started sketching again.
Mm-hmm.
So there was this, a re-enlightenment of this experience of actually, at that stage I suppose it wasn't a philosophical journey or anything I was overtaking, it was just a journey I actually been able to express myself through visual means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So life interrupted once again.
Yes.
Right. And then you decided to, after you decided to go back and study art and take the.
I was in the local town, and it was a chance meeting with somebody, and I suppose it's because whenever I made the decision not necessarily to take part in it, it's not that I made a conscious decision not to be aware of art around me, but of the art world. So I lost contact with friends who were artists.
Mm-hmm.
I lost contact with old tutors. I lost contact with people that were involved in the art community. So I think because of that, I became. I was in 2 different worlds. I'm more involved in the agricultural community, me being a farmer and all the rest of it. And so the idea there is just 2 distinctive routes, which have 2 paths. One was the artistic path, and the other was the agricultural path. I as well firmly down the middle of the agricultural path. I was committed, and so I didn't see the artistic path until at one point they collided, and that's whenever I met the artistic route again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where
So you decided to go study, and now you're well along in that on that
yes, I'm finishing.
that path.
I'm finishing I'm doing this all part time, so I guess I've been at it now 7 years. I'm into the 8th year. I'm nearly finished my 8th year, and my degree is I'm finishing off last 2 years at Belfast University. So it's been a long journey, but it's.
So what inspires you? What inspires you to keep you? First of all, what inspired you early on, and then and then when you were in the hospital and with those sketches, was there a spark that? What would you say was the thing that was it just the sheer joy of drawing, or was there something else that you wanted to express? Do you think, or?
Yeah, I guess at the end, whenever I first went to college, or whenever I first intended to go to college, I was geared towards more specifically the illustrative end,
Mm-hmm.
drawing, sketching, painting. But now I would say I'm heavily involved in more philosophical, more conceptual end
Mm-hmm.
of art. So it's not necessarily within that journey of continuing down an artistic route, I've steered towards the right hand side of the more contemporary. I didn't necessarily make the decision to do that because I've just found myself, I think it's possibly because of my age, you know, I'm more aware of life and its pitfalls, that I steer me in this direction.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's a conglomeration of data that feeds into the idea of how I get to where I am. So there's a lot of aspects of life.
Yeah, so I imagine that's a common path or a common development. Is in the beginning it's a technical, and then as it progresses, the technical becomes the expression of much deeper and more in depth thoughts, emotional life. And
Yes, that's a journey in itself.
mm-hmm.
I'm still very interested in a very figurative approach simply because I feel that sometimes in the art community I have my own very distinctive opinions of how art should function. And I think this is where a lot of art falls short, is that it becomes illegible to an uninformed viewer, so that the ordinary person they've lost art. Fine art has lost a link, an important link in my view, to the uninformed mind. So we as artists, that's where I think we should make it. It has to become less of a
Elitist, perhaps, or
yeah, elitist is a good
or
term.
narrow. Or
Yeah, no, elitist is a good elitist point of view
mm-hmm.
to something that is simpler
Mm-hmm.
for a viewer to uninformed viewer to communicate.
So you would see art as having a function, a sort of a wider. Would the function then sort of be the same? It's just really making it more accessible
Yes.
to sort of a wider audience. Would that be true, or do you think the art itself needs to change?
It doesn't need to change, but I think it does need to change. I think art it does change, and that's where I think art and its function is there are various functions in art, but art should be accessible.
One's some art pieces that you're proud of, and maybe we can just talk about and how that links to what you were talking about earlier, and in terms of how they express something, the personal for you.
Yeah, I guess if there is one particular art piece that would be illustrative of a slight turn in direction for me, would be where I started to look at things more conceptually as opposed to exploration of solely an exploration of paint or description. That was more it would be a piece which I call Coca-Cola piece, where it depicts a life cast of my son, and he took this cast of him, and that was important. That was a life cast of him as a child, and I think he was 11, 12, and which was a life cast of him as a child. So as I could portray him as quite graphically, that he had OD'd on modern living. So in that, I wanted to, at that time, or up until a short time before that, you could say I was consuming too much sugar. I was drinking a lot of Coke, and I was, whenever you get to middle age, you make a decision to start and look after yourself a bit better. The first thing I decided to cut out was my love of sugar. So I cut out all the Coca-Cola, which was having an adverse effect on myself. So I decided to, that being a reoccurring theme over a period of 2 years in my HMD, was the consumption of sugar. So this one particular piece depicts my son, who is OD'd, him being an actor, on sugar and modern living. I have him portrayed as a mannequin because he, like modern society and commercialisation, there's an aspect of the media and advertising that is particularly directed towards young children. And at that stage, it's less prominent now, but certainly at that stage, the media would particularly target children in their advertising. So this is a direct, if you like, the way I see the industry targeting children. Mannequin being a perfect representation of a child. The function of a mannequin is to basically display clothes, and the idea of that we are able to manipulate the mannequin to take whatever pose he wants, whatever pose that we want as consumers. So there's this idea of controlling our children, or not in terms of what we control in our children, the idea that the consumerism is controlling our children and directing this flow of sugar towards them. And there's an aspect that the government don't really want to do too much about it. So there's this relationship that I have with, we all do with our children, being able to want what's best for them. It's not necessarily in our control. So this is the idea of the child who has overindulged in contemporary living and who's OD'd on sugar, and it's Coca-Cola in particular. And Coca-Cola, as you all know, the idea, the name itself is a derivative of cocaine. So in the early days, Coca-Cola would have contained a certain amount of cocaine, and still does. So which partly makes it slightly addictive, along with the caffeine. So.
Okay. So then, following on from that piece, so that was definitely very targeted to sort of your own personal life in terms of your children and the commercial environment they're growing up in.
Yes.
Following on from that, then did that theme start to evolve, or did you go another direction?
No, that theme evolved, and there was another piece that is all about relationships. It's three. It's named Three, and it's particularly targeted at my relationship between my siblings, and relationships with family, and relationships of other people, and balances and imbalances, and so on and so forth. So there's that aspect where I've explored. It's very, for me, it was very personal experience, very personal snippet of my own thinking, my own relationship between two other people. So it evolved from circumstances that weren't particularly pretty, but at that stage I felt that I would like to communicate that to a wider audience. Because a lot of it is written by academics for an academic world, and that's, I think that's a failure on the art world, and a failure on the galleries and the museums to be like that, and it shouldn't be. It should be accessible to everybody. Everybody, not just a handful of academics, and not just a handful of well-educated professors.
So not artists producing art for other artists. So you said that the onus falls on the art community as opposed to the individual artist. What did you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, there's this great term that we have. You've got to play to the gallery. Us as being artists, we've got to play to the gallery game, and that we have to produce work that seems to be more difficult than it actually is, and we have a tendency to pump it up and to elevate it to a higher level.
So how do you mean elevate it to a higher level?
Well, they're taught in our colleges to make her, I think that there's this ideal of art becoming too deep, in order to justify a question, we have to, in this process, we have to be more intense in producing that answer. So I think our work could become too difficult to be legible, too difficult to understand by a consumer.
Does that not risk watering it down? And again, back to the question of to what degree does the artist have to stay true to the inspiration?
No, I don't think so. I think as a farmer and an artist, I can see the two sides. I can see. I don't see the need to elevate the status of a shovel to a device that is meant to move earth or to dig a hole, to anything greater than what it is. So in terms of that, a shovel is a shovel. It's not an elaborate named object to logistically move strata from the ground. A spade is a spade. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Yeah.
The question then becomes, what is the purpose of art?
The purpose of art is to be seen. The purpose of art is to be understood. So that comes back to the purpose. Is that the purpose of art, or purpose of good art, or art can be anything? It's a question that's going to be different for. It's a question that's the same.
And why do we need art, though? What distinguishes art from? You mentioned the spade. I mean, the spade is designed to do a job. Why do we need art?
Oh, well, Well, we can go back to Abraham Maslow. You know, Maslow's pyramid of the hierarchical of needs. So, if you like, at the top of the pyramid is
self-actualization.
self-actualization, and art is certainly part of that, of discovering yourself.
Mm.